Okay, so Jacek is actually part of our research team, so we're going to arrange this presentation so that all of us have a chance to speak, and there may be a bit of a conversational component in the middle of it. I'll introduce it by saying that what we're talking about today is part of a project called Living Archives. It's a 4-year funded research project funded by the Swedish Research Council. So it's a solid academic project, and it spans the Faculty of Teknik och Samhälle, Technology and Society, and the Faculty of Culture and Society in Malmö University in southern Sweden. It's a project that was part of something called the Digitalized Society Initiative, where aspects of digitization were going to be considered and critiqued. We have about 11 researchers involved in various capacities in this project, some just on 20%, some on full. Jacek is a PhD student, and we have a postdoc. So it's quite a varied bunch of researchers, and we have a varied series of strands approaching archives. What we're going to show to you today is an artistic research project that falls under the umbrella of Living Archives, and it uses augmented reality. So in the Living Archives research project, we look at archiving practices, not a particular archive or a database, but a set of processes that open up different affective, spatial, or rhythmic relations. We actually have the comfort of taking a couple of steps back, and instead of having the task of digitizing artifacts for a particular archive, from a particular archive, we can ask about archiving within a broader cultural context. So that explains the sense of looking at archiving as dynamic processes rather than looking at a particular archive. We've also been called the archiving project that doesn't have any archivists or any historians in it, which is not exactly true, but for the most part we are artists, cultural studies people, interaction designers, computer scientists, Daniel's the photographer, and we take advantage of our myriad of disciplines to actually consider archiving and open up aspects of it that might not have been considered in a traditional context. Artistic research is the methodology we're going to open up. Affective, Passages and Tunnels is the artistic project, which was actually what we call a proto-performance. As we develop our research project, we have periodic productions and workshops, which is a way of progressing an artistic research flow by having audience engagement at certain points. So it basically means you're doing the research at the same time as you're doing professional productions, which is fraught, as you can imagine, with tensions and scope for failure, because often you're pushing at ideas that are still being formulated and at technical platforms that are still very, very beta. We showed Affective a year ago at the Copenhagen Renew Festival. We had the opportunity and the privilege of using the outside of the Nikolai Kunsthal. The Nikolai is an 18th century church in the center of Copenhagen that is an artistic, it's a venue for contemporary art. We wanted to use the outside of the building. We'll explain in a moment. We wanted to explore augmented reality running on mobile devices, and at the end of our talk, or maybe in our discussion period, we can show you some of the work. These are what we call the tags that we actually affixed to the outside of the building. So for those of you who are familiar with augmented reality, there's a lot of QR code, the little black and white squares that launch browsers. We absolutely didn't want that because we thought they were, well, ugly. And when they're extremely small, people fall into a mode of just using their mobile devices the way they usually would, which is with this kind of gestural vocabulary, head bent down, closed off into the device. I think Chris captured a little bit of that reservation quite nicely. Jeanette Ganslov is a screen dance artist, a video artist who's a dancer. And I've worked with her for a number of years to explore affective improvisation. I'm a dancer. And Jeanette would film me or other dancers improvising in city spaces where the movement actually comes from our understanding of what we're getting from the environment. We've created a series of videos that we've put into augmented reality, and we realized that even though this artistic project has run for a short time, we have our own archive. So that was our starting point for Affective, which is a play on affect in the city. Then for this piece, we had the advantage of a relationship with the Royal National Danish Theatre, who are in the process of digitizing their theatrical archive. We got a piece of video from the 1950s, which was relatively copyright-free. We were able to use that. We worked with material from the Swedish Film Archive, and we were also able to take some material from the rehearsal process that was happening then and there in the Royal National Danish Theatre. So we played across distant archives, meaning 70 years ago, with what we like to call the archive from 10 minutes ago. So are we constantly archiving ourselves and leaving traces as we move through space, was one of our questions. We were much more interested in affective exchange of people through the material than photorealistic or thorough revelation of the material. In this performance, we experimented with, or in this installation, what is it? An art installation, a performance, an archival piece. We had 4 participatory modes. One was the standard locative media mode, where people could download the app, it's free, Orasma, and they could discover the location, realize there were tags, and they could visit it anytime they wanted. The middle of the night, first thing in the morning, walking their dog, when they're insomniac. And that's a lot of the appeal of locative media. You can just have access to it whenever you want to. We had guided tours where we arranged certain times for people to help people download the browser and walked around the outside of the building. We had about 17 points. We had one night with a live performance where the live performer in a lot of the material, our Affective material, was present. So we had the structure, the tags, the live performer, and an audience of about 12 people with the media on their multiple devices. And we have the scope for a creative reuse and remix option, which I can talk about later in the question period if you'd like. We haven't got there yet. So effectively, the circulation of archival material becomes a sort of relational aesthetics, which I like to call a relational choreography, or a choreography, an open choreography. Let's have a look at the video. That's the picture just now, my answer. That is a tag, very large.
It's nicer the way it kind of falls into the brick. You're opening a new dimension there.
Yeah, it's a passage in the tunnel.
That's some of the balancing material.
There's a strange 3D.
It really does have the 3D quality, holographic.
Really ghostly. We shot this. Oh. And I love the sound. Those cracking sounds of his shoes. It's his ballet shoes. It's really.
I thought it was distortion and time stretching.
Multiple devices downloaded at different rates. People looked over each other's shoulders. The audio also downloaded at different rates, which made for an ambient environment that slid in and out of it. Should we shift over to you? So this is, you can read the paper in the proceedings for a more philosophical elaboration of affect and rhythm, but we're actually working with these and.
Yeah, I think I can represent more of the kind of interaction design and computer science perspective. And one of the things that we were trying to explore in this is how do we kind of design the right thing instead of, designing installation with augmented reality, and how do we allow for exploration and design kind of making before we think about science or before we think about the design of the exhibition. So kind of in the spirit of sketching with technology, or in the sense of some of Bill Gaber's work, we wanted to really find a way to not be inhibited by the constraints of technology, not have to, build the software or build the hardware, as Chris will say. It's not such an easy task. But to really, allow something to happen in a way that's, chaotic and frustrating, but also opening the opportunity to explore how augmented reality could be used across rhythm and effect. A way to kind of see what can be done and not, worry about how it's going to work later. So it's kind of a precursor to, I would say, artistic research, or even a precursor to more traditional types of research where you need to kind of, investigate and to play around before you, set the research design. Otherwise, you end up creating augmented, locative augmented, reality experiences that no one look at, or in 2 or 3 years, are unusable because software changes, and people's, devices change. I think, for the sake of time, I'll just continue. This is Jacek's talk.
All right. Yeah, so throughout the process we also realized that, along the effect, rhythm is a very important element of what we are working with. And through a series of exercises and experiments, we discovered very interesting convergence of bodily rhythms that are present there with us and with people who come to the performance, and also technological rhythms. So each device has some kind of an immanent different rhythmical quality, so to speak. It's the synchronization, it's the Wi-Fi, it's the movement, and so on. So what we're trying to do is what Dan just a little bit, not treat it as a constraint, but kind of a starting point, how we can work with, we're also calling it like polyvocality, where we can work with different types of rhythms instead of trying to impose one and build some kind of a dialogue between rhythms. So Unreal Affective here came very handy, and his understanding of rhythm as a kind of convergence of the bodily with the rational and so on. There is also a little bit more in the paper, so if you're interested, please.
So, when writing this paper, it became clear that there's so much going on in it that instead of just taking a theoretical or a writing that assumed the basis was clear, we had to go back and explain and describe what went on. And that process of explaining and describing is fundamentally phenomenological, which is an academic methodology that actually takes, or philosophical methodology that takes lived experience as its starting point. And we, as the researchers, are embedded in the experience because we acted as guides. I was one of the improvisers in some of the earlier material. The performer was there, and the group had a shared experiential moment. I should say that not a moment, but they were there for a specific event in specific time. Of our 4 modalities for experiencing it, the locative media, the guided tour, the performance was actually the most successful. And we expected that in a way to be the least successful. But it was successful, I think, for a play across many degrees of presence. The live performer, the mediated material, the bodies of the audience, and the ebbs and flows across that. The audience members actually would help each other find the media. If you've used augmented reality, you need to be a certain distance away from it. You need to be a meter or a meter and a half. So there ended up this collaborative rapport between the audience members where they would discover it and then they would help each other discover it. And then they felt free to look over each other's shoulders. It was not your isolated gallery experience. So in writing about these, we isolated 3 of the 17 tags and started to look at what was the archive material, what was the actual tag, where was it located in the building, what visual effect was created, what participation effect, and what rhythmic effect. So these categories became analytic categories, but they're also developmental categories for future iterations of the work. We can understand it from a participatory angle or from a rhythmic perspective. And of course, these categories are actually entwined within one another. So they became a way of unfolding the experience, but also demonstrating how you couldn't really separate the tag from the archival material, from the visual effect, from the participation effect. It was also deeply entwined. So I'm just actually standing on a piece of blue tack here and I'm permanently stuck to the floor. Did you have one? Okay. You can get the, where did we get the Devices working. Two provocations to end this. One is, this is not an archive, or that is not an archive. When I attended the LARM conference in Copenhagen last year, after 2 days of presentations on archiving, I was left with that phrase ringing in my ears. That is not an archive. That's a collection. That's not a collection. That's just some random storage heap of stuff. So I became very aware that there are a lot of structures and principles and obviously exclusionary and inclusionary levels of power within an archive. The second provocation is you do not look at images easily. Now this comes from our newest member of our project, Temi Odumosu, who is a British woman of Nigerian ancestry looking at post-colonial traces of black people within Scandinavia. So what does it mean to say that is not an archive? It means that archival material is contested, fundamentally. And what does it mean to say we do not look at images easily? It means that the past cannot be looked at neutrally. So these become some of our political guiding principles along with the aesthetic and research work that we're doing. Now, we have tags around the room. What we can do is just open them up.
We don't really have time.
I just want to show one, just so in case people have to dash off. So this was one of our more holographic ones that was embedded in one of the arches of the Gothic cathedral. What I will say about the aesthetics is that we had to work quite hard to get AR to show material in a way that didn't look like it was designed for advertising. We needed it to be transparent. We needed the edges to be soft. We needed there to be some sort of a poetic quality that would transport people into a different, maybe the sound is loud on this one, a different sense of time. This one really felt like a tunnel through time. And then this is one of the principles of the browser-based AR system, which is that this space here is alive. You can do something with this space. So we have about 4 devices which we can open up. Yes, yeah, you're welcome to do that. This is the one on the floor. It was important for us also to place tags low down and up high so that the gestural vocabulary of using a device was completely reconfigured so that we weren't all just looking at chest height television monitors. Yeah, so you can have a look at these later if you're interested, and I will say that this is ongoing work. This is very much a proto-performance. It's a beta stage work, so the visuals could use more adjustment. The thought of the choreography across the materials is an ongoing project.
And I think the archival materials as well. I mean, it was our intention to fetch these from different archival sources, but that's not as easy in reality as it is in imagination as well. So. And I think one of the also challenges, of course, is creating the tags and making them work on a large scale, because if you blow up a video frame of an archival, footage from 1950, of course, the granularity of that becomes very fuzzy when it becomes, 1 meter by 1 meter. So we have to add additional kind of markings within it. So, somewhere we got in between QR codes and images, if you look closely enough.
But we are around. If any of you are interested in the possibility of AR within your own context, we're happy to talk about it.
Or artistic practices, or if you're, upset, with our terms of archiving in the process, please, let's have a discussion about it, for sure. Okay?
Thank you.